October 20th, 1943. Inside Warsaw's notorious Powiat prison, a woman lies broken on a concrete floor. The Gestapo have already shattered her legs. They have beaten her for days. By sunrise, she is scheduled to be executed. Yet despite the torture, the Nazis still cannot force her to reveal one secret: the location of more than 2,500 Jewish children hidden across occupied Poland. She knows every name, every address, every false identity. If she speaks, thousands will die. If she remains silent, she dies. She chooses silence because years earlier, she had made a promise not to a government, not to an army, but to herself. A promise that no child would be abandoned to Nazi terror if she had the power to stop it. Her name was Irena Sendler. And this is the true story of the woman who risked everything to save children from one of history's darkest nightmares. When people think of rescuers during World War II, one name is often remembered: Oskar Schindler. But there was another rescuer, a social worker, the young mother, an ordinary woman with no money, no political influence, and no weapon to defend herself. That she carried out one of the most extraordinary rescue missions of the entire war. For nearly 2 years, Irena Sendler secretly smuggled Jewish children out of the Warsaw Ghetto, sometimes in ambulances, sometimes in suitcases, and sometimes through underground sewers. Every rescue carried the same risk. If she was caught, she and everyone helping her would be executed. Eventually, the Nazis did catch her. But by then, thousands of children had already disappeared, and the Germans had no idea where. Irena Sendler was born on February 15, 1910, in Warsaw, Poland. Long before the war, long before the Nazis, the course of her life had already been shaped by one man, her father. Dr. Stanislaw Kaczynowski was a physician known for treating anyone who came to him, regardless of religion or social status. Many of his patients were Jewish. At a time when prejudice was common, he refused to turn people away. Eventually, while treating victims during a typhus outbreak, he contracted the disease himself. He died when Irena was just 7 years old. But before his death, he left her with words she would carry for the rest of her life. If you see someone drowning, you must jump in and save them, even if you cannot swim. Decades later, millions of people would be drowning in hatred, and Irena would remember. In September 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland. Within months, Jewish families across Warsaw were forced from their homes and imprisoned behind walls topped with barbed wire. The Nazis called it the Warsaw Ghetto. More than 400,000 people were crowded into an area barely large enough to sustain a fraction of that number. Food was scarce. Disease spread rapidly. Starvation became part of daily life. As a social worker employed by Warsaw's Social Welfare Department, Irena was granted permission to enter the ghetto under the pretense of inspecting sanitation conditions. Nothing could prepare her for what she found. Children wrapped in rags begged in the streets for scraps of bread. Families lived crammed together in freezing rooms. Parents watched helplessly as hunger slowly consumed their children. Corpses often lay abandoned on sidewalks because families no longer had the strength to bury their dead. Years later, Irena would recall that she simply could not accept what she saw. She knew that behind those walls, an entire community was being condemned, and among them were thousands of children. Children who had almost no chance of surviving, unless someone acted. By 1942, the situation had become catastrophic. The Nazis had begun deporting Jews from Warsaw in massive numbers. Officially, they claimed people were being relocated to labor camps in the east. In reality, the trains were heading to Treblinka extermination camp. Few who boarded ever returned. That same year, Irena joined Żegota, the underground Polish organization dedicated to rescuing Jews. Its members understood a terrifying truth: time was running out. The children had to be removed immediately. But convincing parents to give up their children was almost impossible. Imagine the scene. A stranger arrives at your door and says, "If your child stays, your child will almost certainly die. If you give your child to me, there is a chance they may live." Many parents broke down in tears. Some refused. Others asked the same heartbreaking question: "Can you promise my child will survive?" Irena could not make that promise. No one could. All she could promise was a chance. For countless families, that chance was enough. Many mothers kissed their children goodbye for what they knew might be the last time. Some whispered prayers. Others placed small family photographs into their children's pockets. Then they let go. What followed became one of the most remarkable rescue operations of World War II. Irena and her network developed countless methods for smuggling children out of the ghetto. Infants were sedated and hidden inside ambulances. Babies were concealed in toolboxes, wooden crates, sacks, and suitcases. Some children escaped through courthouses connected to the outside world. Others crawled through underground passages and sewer tunnels beneath Warsaw. Older children often had to memorize entirely new identities, new names, new prayers, new histories. One mistake could expose everyone. Imagine being 8 years old and suddenly being told, "You are no longer Jewish. You must never tell anyone your real name. If anyone asks, your parents are dead." For these children, survival meant forgetting who they were. The danger was constant: a crying infant, a suspicious guard, a forged document discovered during inspection. Any of these could have meant immediate execution. Not imprisonment, not interrogation, execution. Yet despite the danger, the rescues continued. Day after day, week after week, month after month. By the end of the operation, approximately 2,500 children had escaped certain death. Saving the children was only part of Irena's mission. She desperately hoped that one day families might be reunited. So she carefully recorded each child's real name alongside their new identity. She wrote everything down on thin slips of paper. Then she sealed the lists inside glass jars. Finally, she buried those jars beneath an apple tree in a friend's garden. If a war ended, if the children survived, if their parents survived, perhaps they could find each other again. Buried beneath that tree were not merely names. They were memories, families, identities, hope itself. On October 20th, 1943, the Gestapo arrived. Irena was arrested and taken to Warsaw's WWII prison. The Nazis knew she was involved in resistance activities. What they did not realize was that they had captured the woman responsible for rescuing thousands of children. The interrogations were brutal. She was beaten repeatedly. Her legs and feet were broken. She was tortured for names, addresses, hiding places. The Nazis wanted the children, but Irena refused to betray a single person. Not one. After weeks of torture, she was sentenced to death. For most prisoners, that sentence meant the end. For Irena, it did not. Members of Żegota managed to bribe a German guard. On the day she was supposed to be executed, Irena escaped. The Germans officially recorded her as dead, but she was still alive, and even while living under a false identity, she continued helping Jews. When the war finally ended, Irena returned to the garden. She dug up the jars. The lists had survived. Now, she believed, families could finally be reunited. But the truth was devastating. Most of the children's parents had already been murdered at Treblinka. For many survivors, there would be no homecoming, no reunion, no parents waiting. Irena had saved thousands of children, but she could not save the families they had lost. For decades, Irena Sendler's story remained largely unknown outside Poland. Only in the late 1990s did the world begin to rediscover what she had done. When people called her a hero, Irena always disagreed. She once said, "I could have done more." This regret will follow me to my death. On May 12, 2008, Irena Sendler died in Warsaw at the age of 98. Our story did not end there. Somewhere in the world today, there are thousands of children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren alive because one woman refused to look away. Irena Sendler never commanded an army. She never carried a weapon. Yet she fought one of history's greatest evils and won. Not with violence, not with hatred, but with courage. And in humanity's darkest hour, that courage saved thousands of lives. If you enjoy forgotten stories from World War II, please subscribe and join us as we remember the moments history should never forget.